Hello, creative change makers. I'm really excited that today we have the incredible Andi Snelling for today's interview. Welcome, Andi.
Hello, everybody. What a
I'm so
pleasure to be
excited.
here.
So
I mean,
so thank you
create
so much.
the word creative and the word change maker, they must be up there with some of my favorite words.
That is really good. I think we have all got that in common in this space.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Andi is one of the most incredible independent artists in Australia today. She's a performer, a multi-award winning performer, writer, director, producer, even,
Yep,
and theatre
yep.
maker. She does incredible solo works as well, and her show Happy Go Wrong has made a really big impact on the Australian art scene. I really encourage you to go. I'll probably pop under this in the a link to a documentary that Andi has online about her work, Happy Go Wrong, which is an incredible piece. And recently, Andi has also been working as a director on a couple of shows for different fringe festivals. And she's a mentor. She runs a mentoring business called Kick Up the Arts, which is a fabulous name.
I'm very
uh,
proud of that name.
it's great. I love it.
It
And
came to me on a run one day. I went for a run when I used to go running, and it just it was a direct download, clear, simple. Pick up the arts. This is what it is. That's it. Decision made. There was no other names. That was it. So yeah.
it's potent and it's so clear. It's brilliant. And Andi also works as an educator and a facilitator for disability inclusion. She's working in really a diverse portfolio of work. We got to know each other because we both participated in the Australia Council for the Arts Leadership Programme. We weren't in the same programme, but we were in different years. And the organisers said, Jenna and Andi, you guys have to meet.
And they were right.
They're like, these two have got a lot in common, but they don't know each other. So we found our way to meet each other eventually. And I personally feel a lot of resonance with Andi. We share a lot in common. Things to do with our worldviews and how we're approaching our creative practice. I think we both have that kind of connection with our own personal healing and our creative practice. We both perform autobiographical works, create autobiographical works, which is like a discipline on within itself. And I'd say we're probably both what we'd call spiritual women, and we both hold space for others to evolve their own selves, their own creative practice. So, Andi, what have I missed about you here that you want to share, or what have I missed?
Look, that covers a lot of it. I think, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm always involved in something creative and artistic. And then there's a big component as well of that kind of disability, chronic illness, health overlap that often comes into play as well, and access and inclusion. So yeah, I feel like that covers it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there's so many questions I have for you, Andi. Before we dive into some of the work you do in disability inclusion and access, I really would love for you to just tell us about your lived experience as an independent artist performing and creating your own works, and also with the producing work that you do, because many of the people in our course are wearing many hats and doing the same thing, and you are someone who's been doing that for a long time. So
Yes.
What is life like for Andi?
Oh, it's such a beautiful question. And I like that you even asked it in the concept of, or in the container of, what is life like with this, it's not like what is the career like, or, the work aspect. It's what is life like. And I think that in itself is such an important framing of a question. And that is part of my answer as well, is that being an independent maker is it's a lifestyle. It really is my life. It's not I live my life and then here's this thing I do on the side that's work. It's part of my everyday in some capacity. And that doesn't mean it's in a very literal, I'm being paid right now to make the art or do this thing, but it's that I can't help it but think about it all the time, but dream about art, but have it arrive within my being, or be doing something else at the supermarket, whatever, and I'm just suddenly like, boom, there's an idea for a show. So I do feel like, what is life like as an independent maker? Well, just even the fact that there's that independent aspect is such a hint as to what it is like in my life. And it's like my being in essence is imbued in so much of the art I make. It cannot be any other way. And therefore, in reverse, all of that art is imbued in my life and my very ways of being. But to give a more practical response as well, it looks like day to day, days that are very different from each other. No 2 days are the same for me. And I like it that way. And that can also be challenging because I'm also increasingly aware for myself. And I hear this a lot as well with the artists I also mentor and work with, that still the importance of having some sort of consistency or structure is really important as well. And I know this of myself. And so, yeah, my days are very different. My weeks are very different. I might suddenly get a booking. Like my year this year, for example, has looked like me being in many different places constantly. So I just did Brisbane Festival recently with my one-on-one performance art experience, Type a Poet. That was my work. That was me performing that. The week before that, I was in Adelaide wearing my director's hat, directing a solo show, that has just recently toured to Melbourne. I am this weekend off to Sydney to do a 2-week professional development masterclass. And so it really is, no 2 days are the same. So it's a life that is, for me, deeply fulfilling because of the fact that it's I have a lot of ownership over it, I guess. I have a lot of ownership over my career. I've made it all happen, really. And that's been a gradual build. It's not happened overnight. And I would say, even for me, when I set out as an independent maker, because I came more from a traditional drama school and acting background where I was auditioning for plays and just always in other people's visions, basically. I then shifted to making my own work, my own theatre. When I set out, it's not like I had a dream that I was like, this is going to be my career now, and this is how I'm going to make my money, and it's going to sustain itself. I never even really thought of that, or perhaps dared to believe that that was possible at the time. And yet that is what unfolded. And now that it's generating itself more and more, I'm now seeing how much I can shape it and control it and get my like plans down for where I want to be in a year and start to dream big. And I have a lot of manifestation lists, which festivals do I want to be at, etc. Now I am in a position where it's much more, I'm looking at targeted opportunities and things, and opportunities are coming my way. It used to only be I had to go and seek them out. And that's definitely been a gradual build. So it's a very meaningful and fulfilling life. And at the same time requires a lot of self-honesty and accountability of self to continue to make things happen. And importantly as well, look at, when do I need others? Because you can't do it all alone. As solo artists, we still need each other to bounce off of. Which is why I like these kinds of conversations, because we can't do it all alone, and that's where people can really burn out and all of that sort of stuff can happen.
Thank you so much for sharing, Andi. You have such a beautiful presence. I kind of just want to listen, not ask questions. I just kind of want to just you've also touched upon so many things that we've been exploring in the course. And the last one you mentioned just then about burnout and asking for help is really a topic that we've explored a bit. Is there anything that you'd like to, maybe this is a time to ask about your lived experience and the things that you're balancing, and in relation to perhaps your creative practice, your lived experience. Is there anything you want to share with us there?
People talk about burnout a lot, in the creative industry in particular, or if you're an entrepreneur, or obviously it applies to any context, but particularly if you're having to generate work and work opportunities yourself. I think burnout can be something that you can be more prone to, because how do we know when to clock off at the end of the day? Because we're trying to make something happen, and we need the work or the job or the whatever, and it's hard to, especially when you're in a creative process as well. The work is never done, so they say, and it's like, well, how do we just find that faith, to just go, no, I'm stopping now, that's enough. And I think there's a relationship for me between burnout and faith. So trust and faith in myself that I don't need to push myself so far that I reach burnout in order to achieve what I'm wanting to achieve. There's a big faith component for me that's taken me a long time to believe that I can do a certain amount of work or work in a certain way and then stop, call it a day, whatever, take the rest break, take whatever the body's asking for, and trust that it's still going to all work out for me. And that's taken me a really long time to get to that place. And even now, if I'm honest, still constantly tested on that. I'm sure that a lot of people in this course are ambitious. They're not in this course if they're not someone who's ambitious. Like, I can just tell you would be attracting, Jenna, the type of people who they're here because they have stuff to say that's important in the world, and they've got a certain level of ambition. They are change makers. And so I am tested constantly by this desire to just push just a little bit further. And I think the biggest thing that's happened in my life is basically developing chronic illness. So being bitten by a tick in 2014 whilst hiking overseas, and as a result of that, becoming really sick and developing Lyme disease and other tick-borne co-infections. And to give a sort of reduced version of that really long story, basically the biggest lesson I have got out of that, being now in year 9 of that ongoing health management journey, which is very much still ongoing. The biggest lesson I've got out of it is see, now I'm holding myself to account because I'm like, oh, there's so many lessons I've got out of it. What's the biggest one? What's the most important nugget to share? There's no right or wrong, Andy. It's okay. Whatever you say is correct. But one of the biggest lessons I've got out of that journey is around the way I work, and is around going, I'm enough. Because when I fell so ill that I could not work at all in the previous ways I was working, and particularly having grown up as a dancer at a very high level, where I only ever knew one way of working, of creating, of rehearsing, and that was push, push, push. You can never practice enough, and you can sort of never be good enough, and you can never rest on your laurels. And that was so ingrained in me that chronic illness, just by sheer brutal force, had to shake that completely out of me. And there was a point in my Lyme journey around 2018 where a psychologist I was seeing at the time said to me, it's still really important that you find ways to be creative and to make, it's your soul's mission. If you're not doing that, what are you doing? Because I was deeply unhappy at the time and still in a lot of resistance around my illness. And that was a turning point for me, and was the start of a very new way of working for me, where I started to learn that I could create in ways that were slower, but perhaps more meaningful and targeted, actually, and that work doesn't have to be hard. In fact, it's feeling hard, I need to pause and reflect on what I'm doing, because actually, particularly when we're playing with creativity, what actually, and I used this word earlier, what arrives to me is actually when I know I'm in flow, and when, the art is speaking what it's meant to be speaking. And so I was literally creating a show. I then created this show, Happy Go Wrong, from that place of necessity in a way. It was a very life or death moment for me at that time. I created this show that tracks my chronic illness journey and talks about how precious life is and that mortality is real, and created it in just a whole different way that completely broke all paradigms of making and working, for me anyway. And I've discovered since then that I can be laying in the bath and rehearse a show simply by saying the lines out aloud and visualizing it. And that rehearsal is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than me pushing in a studio all day long.
Yeah. And
in fact, ironically, what I did come to discover through that process of not working kind of mode of being was that actually there was something even more powerful and magical about it all than when I did hit the stage and did do the show. There was just something about it, because it was coming less from a pushed place. And then, of course, little did I know at the time, but that show then came to be the thing that really put me on the map for my career. And then nothing's been this, everything thus then, everything changed. And the ability to now get funding and make other work, and then start to work with other artists as a director and teaching, and just so much I can pinpoint right back to that pivotal moment in 2018/2019 when I started creating Happy Go Wrong. I started working in a completely different way, and that way was unique to me, and that would be unique to everyone else as well. And that's a big part of like what I do with my mentoring with artists, is just finding like, what is your way of working that actually works for you? Not the way you've been taught, or not because the artist you admire or the trendy way of working. It's like, it's just a lot of quiet self-observation, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I notice if I've gone for a walk, like, or I notice if I'm listening to a podcast that's on the topic of the kind of is in the theme of the show I'm working on, yet kind of nothing to do with it, that actually then when I finish the podcast, my mind actually has a lot of ideas, or, you know, it's just quietly observing when are you most at play? When are you most free? When are you most likely to have ideas that are helpful land in a way that you can then use them in your work? All that sort of thing. That's a very long-winded way of answering this question around burnout, but I think for me, the answer is actually in, and it might sound very odd, but it is in faith. Faith in your own ability to not have to push and not have to work in these sort of really capitalist induced ideas of productivity. And trust that, yeah, if you're on the right path, it is going to take care of itself. It's like that thing, you lose your pair of glasses and you're frantically looking for them everywhere, and then you can't find them, and you're thus burning yourself out trying to find your glasses. But the minute you go, just leave it, and you walk away and you go make a cup of tea or something, you suddenly remember where you put the glasses.
Yeah.
For me, it's like that. It's like that. The thing arrives when we just are able to just let go of it a bit, kind of trust that, we still have to do the work, and we have to show up, and we have to take action, but it's constantly just a checking in with myself and being accountable and responsible. Like, am I not doing this thing right now because I am just procrastinating and lazy and I can't be fucked and I'm letting myself off the hook? Or no, is this a time for actually the body is requiring that you are in rest right now, or that you do a bit of yoga stretching or whatever. And then the very conundrum in your script that you're trying to resolve, the answer just comes like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that was the most delicious and rich answer, full of truth and vulnerability and honesty too. Thank you for sharing with us your experiences. It really resonates with me, the trust, the openness that you describe. And I love how you have found and defined in a way, and are still exploring your way, Andi's way.
Yeah.
And it's almost like as I observe your work, that's become like a signature that you now hold space and create spaces for others to find their way.
Yes.
And that is a gift to the world. And I've seen you working with Claire and Catherine.
Yes. So just recently, Catherine Hall has been directing her solo show Sheltered.
Yeah.
And then Claire D been directing her cabaret show A Drug Called Fame. Yeah.
Yes. So in the context of, I consider you a subject matter expert in the creation of accessible spaces, disability inclusion, and I can see how this is connected to what we've just been talking about. Could you tell us a bit about your work in that space, and perhaps some guidance for the folks in the course who really would have an intention to be inclusive and create those spaces where people can find their own ways of working?
So true. So great. So first of all, I guess when I became so sick that, like I said before, I couldn't create in ways I previously did, that I had to find new ways. I didn't realize at the time, but what that actually process was me working out my own access needs.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then that becoming part of my creative process to make the show. I didn't realize at the time, I didn't have language for it. And I was only just entering the disability arts space at that time. But now, with all the wisdom and the time past that I now have looking back, that's what that actually was.
Wow.
And I'm really passionate about making everyone aware that we all have access needs. Now, I'm very conscious when I say that is not to take anything away from disabled people whose access needs are often just absolutely required and necessary in order for them to be able to even participate in something. Whereas an access need, it's a spectrum. But everyone has levels of comfort around being able to enter a space or being able to work. And everyone has levels of sense of safety. I don't feel so safe here. I feel uneasy, or I feel so relaxed and at ease here. I'm in creative flow. So I know that sounds it could be very subtle and it's very individual and nuanced, but I'm a big proponent of getting people to start to really self-reflect around this idea of access. What makes me feel able to work and create? Mm. And that's absolutely not to take anything away from disabled people who, just, shockingly still in many cases fighting for access into a building to just be able to set foot in a building, let alone, So, there's that. So I guess I was starting to realize that because my body functioning had changed so much, and my body is still day to day can be very different in the way its symptoms are or aren't manifesting. And so I'm constantly in a state of adjusting. Mm-hmm. And I guess, this is where I started to realize that there's such a correlation between that and because I'm drawn a lot to working with artists who do autobiographical work and or who put a stamp of themselves on their work. You can't do that unless you really know yourself and unless you're supporting yourself in the way you create your work. And that support can only be, based on what you need. Mm-hmm. So sort of that's the first piece that I will say. The other piece along the way is that once I'd made Happy Go Wrong, that was a show I produced where I would say I was accommodating my own access needs within the show. And I would book Auslan interpreter for one night of performance. I would book audio description, those sorts of things. But they were done as what we would call an add-on. So I create the work and then I would book the access service provider and have that as an add-on. But I started to discover after that there are much better ways of being more inclusive. And you use the word inclusive, and there is a difference between access and inclusion. They have a relationship to each other, but inclusion is the ideal gold standard we're going for because it goes beyond mere access, but actual full-blown, this person is very much welcomed. They are encouraged into this space and they are safe in this space. They don't just have access to it. Yeah. Because that's great. I might be able to have access, but then what? Yeah. And so I started to think more about, well, now that I understand better this idea of disability and access, and this idea that disability is more about an environment or a society or systemic structures being disabling to a person rather than the person themselves being the problem and they need to fit into a society. When I started to really unpack that and get clearer for myself on that, I started to challenge myself. How can I have more access embedded in my art? So not just as the add-on, but actually as part of the art itself. And I've actually just been teaching recently at the Victorian College of the Arts, specifically around theatre making and incorporating access. And I shared there with the students this concept I have of how can we make it access as art, where access itself is the art form, not access in an art piece. And I won't go fully into this, but basically I'm developing a new show, and it's gone through phase 1 of development, where I've written the first draft and done a public showing, called Accidental Radical. It's a really awesome 1970s spy thriller, but it has fully embedded access. And what I discovered through that process was access can actually make a work more creatively interesting, and can make me as a creative maker come up with ideas that are just so out of the box. And it brings about all these creative possibilities that I never would have thought about if I wasn't thinking about access. And I'll give a quick example. So in this show, it's a world of spies, and so there's a lot of code languages. And so I play a spy, and there's another spy who is a live Auslan interpreter, who is a character in the show. They're not just in a black t-shirt and pants off to the side in the spotlight, detached from a show, but they're actually a character in full costume. They have a personality. They're part of the show. Then I have clues in Braille hidden around the space, and there's a Braille alphabet where people can decode those clues. I have headsets that half the audience wears that is feeding the audio description to not just blind and low vision folks who need that as an access requirement, but to other people who don't need that as an access requirement, and yet their experience may be more enhanced by receiving that audio information. And they receive extra clues and extra information that the rest of the audience doesn't receive. And if you communicate in Auslan, that Auslan spy is going to give some information or change the narrative a little bit from what I'm actually verbally saying, so that different parts of the audience are receiving a slightly different version of the so-called truth. Again, raising questions around access in society and how we communicate in different forms of information. And so there's a lot more I could say about that project that I won't, but all I'm saying with it is that I discovered through that process that, wow, boy, is that work now so much more interesting, because of the fact that I've had to think from day one about how access might be able to be in the show. It isn't, access doesn't have to be just a practical, clinical thing. It can actually be very creative. And I'm very passionate about that.
It comes across. It's really infectious.
And access, I always joke, is often not financially accessible to a lot of people in terms of, hiring the Auslan interpreter, etc. I've been able to do it because of funding. I wouldn't if I didn't have that. So there are other ways we can do it on more micro scales. And I think sometimes people just avoid the whole thing altogether because they think it's this monolithic beast that they have to get right and perfect. Mm-hmm. But I would argue, start with something, even just make one tiny change in the way you create your work of art or whatever work you're doing. Make one tiny change that is considering access, and that's already a shift, and that's already something. And so, for example, with my little one-on-one performance art experience, Type a Poet, I made that on an absolute shoestring, I can tell you that. And the access for that is very cost effective. I created what I call a sensory board that is part of that experience. That is a large, beautiful kind of wooden board that sits at the entrance to the room where people come in and have the experience in. And that board just has a whole lot of different access tools on it. So instructions in Braille, audio that people can listen to that describes the experience and talks it through them, sensory objects that people can touch and feel and engage with to have a sense of what the experience is going to be. Just tiny touches like that that actually make a massive difference to somebody being able to comfortably access the art. And I totally made that, on a shoestring. So there are these little ways we can work with access, and so it doesn't need to be overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And the final tip I'll give, and then I will stop on this topic, is we can never be thinking about access too soon or too early in a project. Mm-hmm. I would encourage starting to think about it very early rather than creating the project and then at the end going, oh, quick, I need to add on some access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even would you recommend even at the conceptualization phase to be thinking about it?
I would actually, yeah. In fact, I would encourage that because again, I think it'll actually start to get your imagination going in a more exciting way. It'll bring something new and it's a different stimulus. It'll just start to make you think more broadly and differently. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is profound. It's like I've just listened to someone who is on the leading edge of transforming a part of the sector. It's goosebump inducing. I am so excited to see what happens with Accidental Radical. It's just amazing. And the idea that access can be a creative inspiration and
yeah.
And as you started to describe it, I could really see that and hear that and imagine that. I think that is such a gift that you've shared with us. And thank you, Andi, for this is amazing work that you do in the industry as well, transforming the space. So just big admiration for me, and thanks so much for sharing with us about this. I also have got another question for you, which the group would like to know about.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is kind of on a different topic, but
right.
one that you also are familiar with, which is around being an artist working in festivals. And so perhaps could you tell us a bit about your experience as an artist in the festival environment, which festivals you have worked with, and then we'd love your advice on how to approach a festival. And
yes,
so that's kind of the invitation.
Great. So there are so many different festivals out there. I've done a lot of fringe festivals, and that's really how I cut my teeth. Is that the term? That's how I got going as an indie artist. I've done Melbourne Fringe, I don't even know how many times now, a lot. I've done Adelaide Fringe a lot. I've done Edinburgh Fringe. So I've done a lot of those fringe circuit festivals, which can be so helpful for, testing material or if you're starting out. And then I've also done, and this is where I've had a progression in my career from that fringe indie circuit. I have then now gone main stage with my shows, and I've been booked by major festivals, such as Brisbane Festival. And yes, thank you. A big step up for me. Where you're not as scrambling as much to make it all happen or relying on ticket sales, etc. But where you're in that position where festival is paying you for your work, they're doing a buy-in, they're paying your travel and accommodation, and they're taking care of everything, and you're just there to be the artist, and that's obviously the sweet spot where we all love to be in. So I found the fringe festival circuit crucial to my progress and helpful in a multitude of ways. The first step is I created work and I started to build an audience following. Second, they're a great opportunity to get seen by industry, by producers of major festivals and other festivals. They're great for networking, being around other artists. We just learn a lot, basically. And then also, they have awards and things. You can get you can get reviews and can start to build up a portfolio of recognition, I would call it. So that's a very helpful springboard. And that's really been my path to getting into major festivals and main stages, has been by being on the fringe circuit. And I'm not like a snob or anything. Like, it's like I love the fringe circuit and I am still in it, and happily so. But now I'm much more targeted and discerning. And so, for example, with my most recent show, Type a Poet, that started on the fringe circuit, I very strategically decided for myself, I'm going to launch this at Melbourne Fringe Festival 2022. And I was rigorous with myself. I said, I'm only going to do Melbourne Fringe if I get funding, so that I have a certain level of the financial risk taken care of going into the festival. So I did get the funding. So I said, okay, Andy, you're allowed to do this. And my strategy was, this is probably the only fringe festival I'll do this show at. Doesn't mean I'm not open to other festivals, but there'd have to be a strong reason for me to do it. But I'm going to do this as my springboard into then getting the work out there and pitching it beyond the fringe circuit.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, that plan actually worked. I didn't know if it would, but it did. Because straight off the back of that festival, I had 2 major festivals want to book it straight away. And then now there's been a cascade since then. And I'm literally this week got a whole lot of festival bookings and stuff happening for 2024 with that particular work. And so that strategy for me has really worked. And that's after years of getting to that point of realizing, yeah, there can be clear steps taken. But so if it's a fringe festival, you don't need to be approaching them. It's an open access festival, so you just need to simply, pay the registration fee, put together your concept and blurb, etc., and do the festival. If it is a major festival and there is pitching involved, there's a multitude of ways you can do it. You could invite the person to come and see your show in some other context. Maybe it is at a fringe festival. And if you know that person's in town, you could invite them to come and see the work. If they can't make it, then it can be helpful to have footage of the work so they can at least see it as part of your pitch. It's a lot harder to pitch something that you don't have anything to show for it. So really it's putting together a pitch pack. So they want to know, they want an understanding of it, and they, the more collateral you can build up around the work, the better. So images, short video clips, all of that stuff is really helpful. And really another piece of advice I'm going to give that might surprise some people is just treat everyone like a fellow human as well. So I used to, in my earlier career, I used to be kind of put festival programmers and producers up on a pedestal. And I used to think, oh, they're not approachable, or I've got to be very formal in my emails, or, I'm not like that anymore. I now just realize, and have come to realize from firsthand experience getting to know these people, they're just humans too. And, as an indie artist, you are worthy. And
absolutely.
So I actually encourage artists to be, again, just putting their own signature on your pitch, on your email. Dare to be a bit cheeky, put your personality in. Maybe look up that producer, something about them online that's a bit quirky or different, or, if they have a hobby and because you've seen it mentioned online or something, mention that in your email. I did that before with someone where I mentioned something. I noticed they were into detective podcasts or something, and I'm into spies and detective things, and I remember just writing that in like the opening line of my email, and it was really casual. And some people might say like almost a bit too over friendly, given I didn't know the person very well. But when they replied, they specifically mentioned that point and were like, I could tell they were laughing when they wrote it. And it's just little things like that. I think sometimes we get lost in a big industry and we forget that everyone is just a human. And I take things a lot less personally these days. And it's good just to remember that, like, if you don't hear back from someone or they don't book you or whatever, like, doesn't mean I'm not going to go back again and try next year. I love festivals. I think it can be so beneficial to be part of a festival. Standalone seasons outside of a festival can also be a benefit, but I think it's just about understanding what is it you're wanting to achieve here, and often I think of when I'm looking at an opportunity or work, I think of these three categories of is it for the love, for the money, or the strategy? And ideally, it's all three in one. You know,
Yeah.
I want this opportunity because for the love, because wow, this is so aligned with me, my values. It's a love thing. Strategy, okay, maybe there's not a lot of money in this one, but strategically, this is going to be a good stepping stone for me, or the opportunity to work with this person or in this festival. I may not make much money, but I can see the long-term strategy.
Yeah.
You know, or money. Okay, I'm actually, I'm not that excited by this opportunity or festival, whatever, but gee, the money's bloody good and they're going to book me at this time in my life. That's worth taking, you know. But as I say, ideally, it's all three in one. You know, that's amazing when we get the love, strategy, and money all in one. I love that. That's the best feeling ever, right?
That sounds good.
So good. So good.
Thanks for sharing your wisdom there. I love the notion of just being your full self and putting your whole personality into your contact with the festivals. Andi, can I ask you one last question? Are you okay for time?
Yes, yes.
As you were talking just then, you're talking about the love, the strategy, and the money. Which is kind of in alignment with some of the work we've been doing in the course around like contextualizing and putting a vision around our practice and a direction and a push and a pull. And so I would love to ask you about your vision for a future, Andi. Like, what is a vision for the world and for the future that inspires you to keep going and that you would like to see?
I felt this recently, actually, in the project I've just been working on recently, this show Sheltered I've been directing at Melbourne Fringe. The artist, Catherine Hall, has cerebral palsy. I think I may mention that. And was homeless for a period of her teenage years and lived in youth shelters, hence the show being called Sheltered. And just what I think makes me so passionate for the future of the arts, etc., is just, because I just saw it again and again with Catherine's performance, is the more you are who you are truly are in your art, the more that can come through in your art. Just everything else is taken care of. And the more it actually resonates and affects change in the world. I really work a lot with this concept of the personal as universal. So the more I can go deep and personal in my art, and that doesn't mean, you know, I mean that in a healthy and safe way. So still only being vulnerable and sharing what is healthy and safe to share. Boundaries are very important and necessary. But the more I go specific and to what is me, the more it actually becomes universal. And that's forever going to continue to blow my mind. I learned that with Happy Go Wrong. I thought, how specific was my story? A tiny insect, one tiny part of this massive universe, bit me and gave me like a hell of a life change, and, you know, sent quite a incredible message to me in no uncertain terms. How would that story resonate with so many people? And it kind of continues to blow my mind that the more I share that show on stage, the more people actually recognize themselves in the story, even though it's a very niche thing that happened to me. I think the essence of what it captures is just innately human. And so this is what I come back to time and time again. And I see it with Catherine in Sheltered, where we built her access needs into the show. Here's a performer who can't remember lines. A big part of feature of her disability, she can't remember things. And so we just built into the show that I'm a prompter who sits in the audience, who prompts her lines. She can stop in the middle of the show and say, Andi, I don't know where I am. Have I already done this part of the show? And it's built into the fabric of the show. It's explained and set up from the start. And the audience loves it. They're a part of it. They're just witness to something that's so real and charming and part of the art form. It's a craft, actually. And just, yeah, so the more I just witness this unapologetic, just be you and do the thing how you're really meant to do it your way, the more that just disarms people who are witnessing that and gives permission to them. And then everything else just doesn't matter in the world. And I don't mean that as in there's a lot going on in the world right now that's so intense and full on. And I don't mean that we just then ignore that, but just the little gripes that we have that really aren't important, you know, all that bullshit, the bullshit that we carry, it just, I watch it in an audience, it just falls away. And there's just a freedom in that. And so, yeah, I just see that it's like I know it already, but I'm constantly needing reminding of it. And the more I work with artists and with myself, the more I'm just seeing that is the truth. It is an unequivocal truth. You know?
Personal truth and a universal truth.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Well, my heart feels warm as you describe your vision for the future. Thank you, Andi, for sharing so much with us today and your wisdom. There's so much I think that those watching will take away. And I'm really grateful and wish you all the best for your practice and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. Just, yeah, wishing so much, you know, inspiration and challenge and ignition to everyone who's bore witness to this conversation as well. Yeah.
We're very lucky to have had you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andi.